Hello, Mr. K here again. We're looking at engine overhaul part 3 today. We're going to talk about boring, honing, and decking a block or surface grinding a block or heads. So let's jump into it here. We're going to talk about boring, when and why, honing and types of hones and how do you hone an engine block, and surface grinding and decking a block. All right, so when do you bore a block? So if you guys should be at the point now, or if you aren't, you will be at the point where when you measure out your cylinder bores, you see if they're within factory spec or not. Okay, here's another way of looking at it. If that bore is too worn out and too large, especially up at the top here, remember where the rings stop and where all the heat and compression and everything is high. If it's worn beyond limits, then you're going to have to bore it out. The engine needs to be bored out so that we can turn this back into a perfectly straight cylinder wall again. So these rings will seal up. Also, if it's out of round, so if it's if the cylinder bore is tapered, if it's larger at the top than it is at the bottom, or if it's larger one way than it is 90 degrees measured the opposite direction, another reason to bore. Or if you just want more horsepower, right? Because you're going to create a larger cylinder, can bring in more fuel and air, bigger bang, right? Hits the pushes the engine with more power. Okay. Okay, so how does an engine get bored? How do you bore an engine? Well, a couple things with this. First of all, this is not something you can do. This is a machine shop only job. You got to be trained. You got to have $10,000 to $20,000 tooling at the cheapest, I would argue, to be able to do this. This is not something even a skilled mechanic with a dozen tools in his garage, high-end tools, even tire shops, mechanic shops, places like that are not even going to be able to do this. This is the specialty job only. So when you take it to the machine shop and you say, hey, my cylinders are out of round, or I measured them, they're out of limits, I need you to bore my block, I need you to make the holes bigger so I can buy bigger pistons. They're going to ask you, well, how much do you want it bored over? You want it bored over, I think I put the options in here, 10,000ths, 20,000ths, 30,000ths of an inch, or do you just want us to bore it over just barely big enough until it cleans up the bore, or until the bore is truly round again and it's not tapered and all that? Most people, if they're just rebuilding the engine, they go with the last option. Well, just clean it up, just keep going bigger and bigger until you actually clean up the bore. Last engine I took in to have bored out, they had to go 40,000, so they had pretty bad bores. It was very worn. Hopefully you don't come across that, but anyway, those are your options. Typically, go ahead and watch this video at this time. Okay, you should have just watched that video. Hopefully that gave you a little bit of a interesting preview on how boring is done. Okay, so after it's bored, you need to hone, or even if you don't bore it out, but you're replacing piston rings on a rebuild, you still need to hone the cylinder. This video is going to tell you why. So go ahead and watch this video. All right, you should have just watched that video. So let me sum it up here with some reasons. You need to hone the cylinder when the rings are replaced or the engine's bored out. This you can do yourself, as you saw in the video. There's a few different types of hones, but we're going to talk about two of them today. And like I said, you can absolutely do this yourself. The two main types of hones are ball hone or rigid stone hone. And most manufacturers are going to tell you want a 45-degree marks in the cylinders. So you're actually putting scratches in the cylinders, and that's what you want to do because those scratches are what holds the oil. But you don't want to hold too much oil or it'll burn the oil, but you don't want to hold too little oil or you get increased ring wear. Okay, types of hones. This is my personal favorite style of hone, the ball hone, also called the dingleberry hone. Okay, this is good for cylinders that aren't perfect. So if you don't get it bored out and you're just doing what they call it's knocking off the glaze on the cylinder walls, or knocking off the mirror or the shine, just because you're putting new rings in, which a lot of times is what I do. I don't typically get my engines bored out because it's just more money. I use a ball hone. Ball hones flex a lot, and they are able to catch all the imperfections and kind of conform to the uneven cylinder walls. But they're not as good as at knocking down high spots or burrs, because they move around, they flex a lot, they're kind of unreliable. It's not like one of these guys, which is a stone hone, a rigid stone, stone hone. It gives a nice flat finish every time, so it's pretty reliable. You can adjust the tension up here with a spring, so if you want a more aggressive hone, you can do that. They're good for fresh bored out cylinders that are perfectly round. They're better at knocking down high spots and help give you a perfectly flat hone. And like I said, you can adjust the tension, but they won't conform to imperfections, so that's the bad part. Okay. Okay, so let's talk about the honing crosshatch pattern. He talked about it in the video, but just to make sure you understand here, you're going to get a crosshatch pattern if you do it correctly. Okay, it's typically you want about a 45 degree. That's just kind of the general rule. As you can see in this photo, that's what you want to see when you're done honing. But just for fun, I pulled up a 96 Chevy pickup with a 350, just a super common truck that's out there, right? I'm trying to just find super common stuff. And Chevy says, finish the bore with a 45 to 65 degree crosshatch pattern. They want you to do a 45 to 65. 65 is getting pretty aggressive. That's pretty tall hone, some people would call it, which would mean that you think of the lines as being more straight up and down the cylinder wall instead of flat. That'd be 90 would mean I guess would be more of closer to straight up and down, that type of thing. Or technically, I guess 180 would be. But anyway, the more up and down you have, the less oil, shouldn't say that, they're going to hold oil, but it's going to push the oil farther up the cylinder, and you could end up with burning more oil, put it that way. So that's a pretty steep crosshatch pattern. You don't see that too often. Okay, how about a 96 Ford pickup with a 460? Another super common engine out there, especially back in that day. What's interesting here is they don't give you a degree that they want you to hone it, but they say use only a spring-loaded type cylinder hone. They only want you to use the rigid stone hone. They don't want you to use a ball hone. I don't know why. That's what they're saying. And what's also interesting is they want you to install and tighten all the main bearing caps before you hone the cylinder bore. So I can only assume that when you tighten the main bearing caps, it's going to distort the engine block a little bit to its running condition because of the stresses. So I thought that was fairly interesting as well. Okay, so we're switching gears. Let's talk about decking and surface grinding. Go ahead and watch this video. Okay, you should have just watched that video. Neat video on decking or surfacing an engine block, and shows how it's done. So when are you going to do this? Well, here's another video for you. Go ahead and watch that one. Okay, in that video, it shows you exactly when you would need to deck or surface an engine block. It shows how to look for warpage and all that good stuff. So this is basically in here how I'll want you guys to check for it. We'll have a flat bar, put that across, and just take your feeler gauges and check them in there. And this is kind of what I use, the X pattern, okay? And then I think I just have you guys do one across just for time's sake. So we're gonna deck the block if, or surface grind the block if these are out of limits, right? If it's too warped. So the decking is gonna cut off top layer of metal to make it flat again. And typically, you hope they don't have to remove more than about 5 thousandths, but generally you don't want to remove more than about 10 thousandths. Depends on the manufacturer, but anything more than 10 thousandths can run into some other stuff that we're not going to get into today. The engine will actually run differently because they all have higher compression. Okay, just here's a little note again out of that Ford pickup manual, and they're saying do not machine more than 10 thousandths of material from the original cylinder block to head surface. So I just thought that was interesting. That's going to include the head too. So if you do 5 thousandths on the block and 5 thousandths on the head because they're both warped, that's right at your limit of 10 thousandths. And of course, maximum deck warpage on that same engine, they're going to say is 3 thousandths within any 6-inch area. Overall warpage 6 thousandths. So if your block was warped 6 thousandths and your head was warped 6 thousandths, you'd have to get them decked 6 thousandths a piece. Now you're over that 10 thousandths limit and you got a big problem. Now your engine's going to run completely different. Not completely. Your engine's going to run differently. It's going to create some other issues. So could have interference issues with valves hitting the top of the piston because you're actually getting the valves too close to the piston. But anyway, another story for another day. Okay, on that note, go ahead and complete your assignment and have a good day.